Hola! Today I'm taking you somewhere you never expected to find real answers. There's a porch light that stays on, but no one ever walks through the door. You think you're just aging, but something deeper is quietly being erased. A hallway clock stopped at 4:12 p.m., and nobody ever fixed it. This isn't just about pills or pressure Kaseved. It's about what healing used to feel like. There's a silence in your bones, and your heartbeat remembers what your mind forgot. Be careful, Prakad. By the end of this story, your health might never look the same again. That same cup of coffee every morning, maybe it's not helping you anymore.
If this touches something hidden inside you, like this video and subscribe.
And tell me what city you're in and how many years you've carried.
Now take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's unlock the stories never meant to be forgotten.
Sit down in the sunroom. The chair creaks under your weight, the same creak it made when your father used to sit in it, long before you cared about vitamins or hormones or what your blood pressure did at night. The file rests on your lap. You flip through it slowly. Lab work, notations, small observations written in half cursive. But it's the missing pages that hold your attention. Not for what's written on them, but because someone decided you shouldn't see them. Do you remember the year your energy dropped? Not all at once, but like someone gradually dimming a light. First, it was needing an extra nap after lunch. Then, the coffee didn't quite wake you up the way it used to. Your skin felt thinner, your breath shorter. You used to run up the stairs, now you count them out loud to keep rhythm. And intimacy? That went quiet too, like a room sealed off in the house. Not gone, just quieter. Back then they called it normal aging. You believed them. Everyone did. But part of you always wondered why some people didn't age that way. Like Mr. Ellis, your neighbor who still chopped wood at 70, always smelled faintly of eucalyptus and sea salt. He used to say, "Your energy's in your glands, not your age." And he'd slap his lower back and wink, a gesture that made no sense to you at the time. You didn't know he was talking about the adrenal glands, those walnut-sized organs that sit above the kidneys, pumping out cortisol and adrenaline. Tiny things, but they govern your response to stress, energy, sex hormones, even inflammation. There was a time in the 1970s when some doctors believed adrenal exhaustion was the silent epidemic, especially in men over 50. But then came the pharmaceutical boom. Pills for energy, pills for sleep, pills for sex. And just like that, the glands got quiet in the conversation, replaced by bottles with blue labels. You close the file and walk into the kitchen. You still remember where you used to keep the supplements, third shelf, behind the coffee mugs. The labels are faded now. Ashwagandha, rhodiola, ginseng. You used to read about them in Prevention magazine, or hear about them on late-night AM radio, right before the gospel hour. The body wasn't always something to manage. It used to be something you listened to. You opened the cupboard, and tucked in the back is a bottle you almost forgot. Adrenal cortex extract. Desiccated, it says. From grass-fed cattle. You bought it after hearing Barbara O'Neill talk about it on a DVD someone passed to you at church. She'd spoken softly but firmly about how modern life had squeezed every drop from people's glands, and now they walked around hollowed out, calling it retirement. You didn't finish the bottle. Maybe you didn't believe her. Maybe you just forgot. But now, looking at that circled phrase in your own file, possible adrenal fatigue, something tightens in your chest. Not fear, recognition. Because what if your tiredness wasn't inevitable? What if someone knew, but didn't think it was worth mentioning? The clock on the stove blinks 12 o'clock. The power must have gone out recently, but you didn't notice. And suddenly you remember something. In your 20s, during your time in North Carolina, you worked on a farm for one summer. And there was an old woman named Hattie who used to bring the men herbal tea at sunrise, said it kept the edges smooth. You asked her what was in it once. She just smiled and said, "Deer don't need coffee, baby. They just need the woods." You never asked again. But that tea, it gave you a kind of calm energy you never found again. not in pills, not even in coffee, and it makes you wonder, what else have we forgotten in our rush to fix what wasn't broken? You stand in the kitchen now, barefoot on the cool tile, staring into a coffee mug that still holds the stain of yesterday's brew. You always drank it black, thick, bitter, no sugar. It was never about the taste. It was about the ritual, the sound of the kettle, the clink of the spoon, the warmth of the ceramic between your palms, like holding a small engine still humming. But there was a time when coffee wasn't just coffee. You remember Uncle Silas. He wasn't your real uncle, just a man who showed up at every family reunion, wearing suspenders and an old brown hat, with a feather in it. Everyone said he was odd, but no one could ever say why. He lived alone in a clapboard house outside Jackson, Mississippi, surrounded by pine trees that whispered secrets in the wind. You used to spend weekends there back when your knees didn't ache in the morning. And every sunrise, without fail, Uncle Silas would scoop a golden powder into his coffee before sitting on the porch. You asked him once what it was. Pine pollen, he said, not even looking up. Good for your fire. You didn't know what he meant. You thought maybe it was a southern thing. But years later, after your third appointment with the urologist and a drawer full of little blue pills that never felt like you, the memory came back. And it hit different. Pine pollen, he'd said. Good for your fire. You read somewhere, maybe it was a forum, maybe a crumpled magazine in a waiting room, that pine pollen is nature's own source of testosterone. Not synthesized, not altered. Just pure, wild androgen from trees older than memory. You looked it up again last night. Turns out the science is starting to catch up with Silas. Studies whispering now, cautiously, quietly, about phytoandrogens, about natural testosterone precursors, about how men once relied on the land before they relied on prescriptions. But no doctor ever asked you what kind of coffee you drank. No one asked about Uncle Silas either. You find yourself opening the spice cabinet, looking for it, that little jar you bought years ago in a health food store in Asheville, the one with a label written in cursive script. Pine pollen wildcrafted. It's still there, pushed to the back behind expired turmeric and a bottle of crushed red pepper. You unscrew the lid. The smell is soft, like forest dust. You pinch a bit between your fingers. It shimmers. You stir it into your coffee just like Silas used to do. The liquid turns cloudy, golden at the edges. You lift the mug and sip. Tastes like memory, and something else. You walk out to the porch. The boards groan under your weight. The same sound they made when your children ran barefoot across them on summer evenings, chasing lightning bugs. You sit. The morning is cool. Mist curls off the grass. Somewhere down the street, a dog barks once and falls silent. You sip again. And in the stillness, something stirs. Not in your body, but in your remembering. Because now it's not just about pine pollen. It's about the way Silas lived. He walked every morning before breakfast. Said the body needed motion before fuel. He chewed his food slowly, eyes closed. Listened to gospel and drank water from a well he swore had healing minerals. He never married. Said love made him too tender and he didn't like how that felt in his bones. But when he hugged you, his arms felt like trees, old and strong and full of sap that still moved. You never saw him get sick. You never saw him complain. You never saw him forget. Some geriatricians insist there's no scientific link between natural testosterone sources and virility in older men. They use phrases like placebo effect and insufficient data. But what if data can't measure dignity? What if science, for all its brilliance, doesn't remember Uncle Silas? You do. And now the sun is warming your knees and you feel a kind of strength that isn't loud. It's not arousal. It's not stimulation. It's presence. Like your body is returning to you. Like the silence between heartbeats isn't empty. It's alive. You close your eyes. And you hear it again. Good for your fire. There's a box in the attic with photos of Silas. You haven't looked at it in years. One of them shows him holding up a coffee mug, smiling at the camera, sunlight on his face. You think maybe, just maybe, the fire was never really gone. Just smoldering. And maybe all it needed was a little golden dust. The community room smells like paper and lemon floor polish. There's a low hum from the vending machine, and somewhere behind the folding chairs, a television cart, The old kind with wheels that squeak stands, waiting. You're one of the first to arrive, so you sit near the back, where the light from the window falls across your lap in long, thin stripes. Today's Wellness Hour is hosted by June, a former nurse who still wears her hair in a stiff bouffant. She doesn't say much anymore, but every third Tuesday she brings a DVD from her collection, lectures usually or tapes pulled from public access channels that feel like they belong to a different century. She presses play and the screen crackles to life. It's Barbara O'Neill. You know the name. You've heard her voice before. Sharp, deliberate, almost soothing in how certain it sounds. She stands before a small whiteboard in a room filled with plastic chairs and worn-out carpet, and she's talking about the liver, the gut, the glands, the blood. You heal the body, she says, by removing what harms and giving it what strengthens. The rest? The body knows. Someone in the front row scoffs. Someone else nods quietly, arms folded across a chest filled with too many pills and not enough answers. But for you, something shifts. You're not watching a lecture. You're remembering a kitchen. Not yours. Your mother's. The air thick with the sting of vinegar and garlic. A pot on the stove simmering like a potion in a fairy tale. You were barely tall enough to reach the counter, but the smell, oh, it burned. She called it the tonic. It lived in a glass jug with a cork top, tucked behind the flour tins. She'd pour a shot of it every winter morning into a tiny cup no one else ever used. A chipped piece of porcelain with a red rooster on the side. Apple cider vinegar, garlic, onions, horseradish, cayenne, and raw honey to keep the flames from rising too fast. You asked her once what it did. She just said, "It keeps the cold out." Back then you thought she meant the weather. Barbara on the screen is writing something about intestinal permeability. Leaky gut, she calls it. Talks about inflammation, and men who lose their strength not from age but from acid, from rot in the gut lining, from decades of silent irritation that medicine calls normal. You sip water and feel your stomach respond like a dog hearing its name for the first time in years. Your mother knew. She didn't need charts. She had stories, recipes, a gut instinct passed down from her own mother, who carried cloves of garlic in her coat pockets during flu season and rubbed mustard oil on your feet when you were feverish. It was never about being trendy. It was survival. But somewhere along the way, the tonic disappeared. Your wife didn't believe in it. Said the vinegar would strip your stomach lining. Your doctor raised an eyebrow when you brought it up in 1998. And besides, pills were easier. One for blood pressure, one for cholesterol, one to help the first two work better. Now sitting here you wonder, when did the jug vanish from the cabinet? You didn't throw it out. Just stop being there. Barbara's voice grows stronger as she speaks of self-healing. How the body is not a machine but a garden, and if you nourish the soil, everything else follows. There's a pause in the room. Someone coughs. A chair squeaks. And you remember something else. The year you got pneumonia, your mother came over with a jar. She hadn't brought the tonic in years, but she said she'd had a dream. She placed it on your nightstand and whispered, "You're too tired. Drink this." You did. And the fever broke 2 days later. Coincidence, maybe. But still, no one wrote it down. No one reported it. It didn't make your chart. But you remember. When the DVD ends, June clicks the remote with finality. No discussion. Just silence and the quiet rustle of bodies rising from chairs that have molded themselves to too many aging spines. You don't move right away. Instead, you close your eyes and picture that jug. The glass was cloudy near the bottom. The liquid separated if it sat too long. You had to shake it before pouring. The garlic would cling to the cork. You'd wince as it went down. But 10 minutes later, you'd feel something warm in your belly. Like a pilot light relit. Not excitement. Not caffeine. Vitality. Some doctors insist there's no verified evidence for vinegar and garlic as curatives for male health or energy. They cite inconsistent studies. Warn against unregulated doses. But you think about how long your mother lived. How clear her eyes were until the end. How she never needed a walker. You think maybe it wasn't the tonic that kept her strong. Maybe it was the belief that her body still knew how to heal. You stand slowly. Your joints ache. But something inside feels awake. You make a note to buy garlic, vinegar, cayenne, maybe even a little horseradish. And you decide you'll find a glass jug, one with a cork top, and space enough for remembering. The house next door has been empty for 7 years. The blinds are still drawn, though no one's peered through them in ages. Ivy climbs across the bricks now, curling over the porch rail like fingers that never let go. The mailbox leans slightly left, rust spreading like a quiet bruise. But you still remember who lived there. A man named Howard. He never spoke much, never waved, just nodded once when your eyes met across the hedges. Every morning before sunrise, Howard would step out onto his porch, barefoot even in winter. You watched him from your kitchen window, cradling your coffee like a shield against the chill. He'd stand there still as a prayer, then slowly, deliberately step onto the snow-dusted grass. 1, 2, 3 steps. No flinch, no socks, no shoes. You thought he was mad, or at least a little broken. Who walks barefoot in December? But you never saw him get sick. He was lean, always carried a canvas tote full of vegetables and books from the co-op, wore the same thick wool sweater even when it was warm. You assumed he was just eccentric, one of those quiet old-timers who thought the world had moved on without them. It wasn't until after he passed that you found the journals. His niece had come to clean out the house. She couldn't keep everything and was tossing boxes to the curb. You asked if you could look through them. Something told you not to walk away. They were notebooks. Stacks of them, some spiral-bound, others wrapped in twine. The handwriting was neat, almost like script. Cold grounds the body. Pain is not always a warning, sometimes it's an invitation. You flip a page. We used to call it hardening. My grandfather would break the ice on the water barrel and splash his face before sunrise. Said it told the heart to keep beating. You didn't understand at the time. Now you're not so sure. Somewhere between one prescription and the next, your hands started to lose their warmth. Circulation, they said. Normal at your age. But your fingers feel numb even on sunny days. Howard's journal talked about cold exposure, not as punishment, but as conversation. How standing barefoot on snow could awaken the nerves, stimulate the blood vessels, tell the adrenal system, stay ready. You read about hormesis, a term scribbled in the margins, the idea that small intentional stress can make the body stronger, like lifting weights, or fasting, or walking barefoot through frost. Some geriatricians insist such practices are dangerous, too risky, they say. Older bodies are fragile, but Howard never seemed fragile. He moved like a man who knew where his edges were. You remember once seeing him pick up a large bag of salt for the driveway with ease. No grunt, no hesitation, just the clean strength of someone whose muscles still listened. In one of the notebooks he wrote, "Erections are not about blood. Not entirely. They're about belief. The body must believe it still needs to rise, and the mind must allow it." You read that line 3 times. Then you put the journal down and stared out the window at the patch of yard where he used to stand. You walk there now. It's colder than you expect. The grass is damp, the air sharp. You slip off your shoes, then your socks. The earth feels electric beneath your feet, not painful but alerting. Every toe seems to wake. Blood pulses harder. Something inside you shifts. You stand there, not moving, eyes closed. The neighborhood is quiet. Just the sound of leaves. A bird overhead. Somewhere a car door slams. You stay until the cold feels like a part of you. Later, back inside, your feet tingle. The kind of tingling that makes you remember being alive. Like how it felt to wade into a cold river as a child. Your father yelling from the shore. You'll get used to it. You think maybe Howard wasn't trying to prove anything. Maybe he was listening to the cold, to his blood, to the part of him that didn't want to go quietly. You make tea and pull one of his notebooks from the drawer where you keep old keys and unpaid bills. On the inside flap is a quote, written in block letters. "If warmth is comfort, cold is wisdom." You smile. And for the first time in years, you start to wonder if maybe what you've lost, energy, arousal, memory, isn't gone, just underused. Like a muscle waiting to be asked. Like blood waiting to move. You place the notebook by the window. Tomorrow morning you'll stand barefoot. 2. Just for a minute. Just long enough to remind your body you still belong to it. You never liked opening her drawer. It's been 6 years now, but the scent is still there. Lavender, maybe, or that rose lotion she always used too much of. The handle sticks a little, just like it did when she was alive, and for a moment you hesitate, hand frozen in midair. But something pulls you forward. Something quiet. Inside. A few folded scarves, a stack of expired pharmacy receipts, 2 dried rose petals pressed between church bulletins from 2003, and there it is. The yellow pillbox. Second shelf. Always the second shelf. You still remember her fingers, thin, a little shaky, moving over each compartment with focus. Mornings in the kitchen, soft light through the blinds, her hum echoing off the tiles. You pick it up. It's lighter than you expected. Some of the letters are worn off. Monday has become just MO. Inside, only one compartment isn't empty. Friday. And tucked beneath the tiny plastic flap, folded like a note passed in church, is a piece of paper. You open it. It's a recipe, written in her handwriting, round, gentle, a little faded at the edges. Coffee booster for the morning. Don't tell Harold it's healthy. 1 teaspoon maca root, half a teaspoon raw cacao, half a teaspoon beet powder, dash of cinnamon. Stir into hot coffee, drink before breakfast. You stare at it, breath caught in your throat. You don't remember this. She never told you. Maca root, cacao, beet. You recognize the names. You've seen them on labels at the health store, next to jars that cost too much and promise too little. But she believed in it. Enough to write it down. Enough to hide it from you. Probably because she knew you'd scoff. Back then, anything natural felt like make-believe. You were chasing numbers. Blood pressure, cholesterol, testosterone. She was chasing balance. You never asked her why she stopped singing in the morning, or when she stopped making the coffee first. Grief has a way of hiding in routines. You only see it once it's too late. You walk into the kitchen, holding the note in your palm like it might dissolve if you grip too tight. The light looks the same as it did years ago. Golden, a little dusty, falling across the counter just where her hand used to rest. You open the cupboard. Some of it's still there. The maca root is in a glass jar with a faded label. The beet powder is clumped but still red. You stir the mix into your coffee. The color changes, earthy dark, with a hint of rose. You sip. And it hits slow, not like caffeine, not like a jolt. More like a return. Like memory drawn back into blood. You close your eyes and see her again, not sick, not shrinking into herself, but upright, humming, spoon in hand. Strong. Whole. Cacao, natural theobromine. A soft stimulant that opens blood vessels. Beetroot, nitrates that support circulation. Maca, an adaptogen that old Peruvian farmers once called the strength of the mountain. None of this was in your medical charts. No one ever asked what she was giving you quietly. In sips and spoons and glances. Some clinicians roll their eyes at these powders, say the effects are marginal or anecdotal. But you were there. You lived it. You felt different when she handed you that cup, didn't you? Not just awake, alive. You finish the mug and the warmth sits low in your belly. Your hands stop trembling. Not because the ingredients are magical, but because they came from someone who believed your body still wanted to live. You walk back to the drawer and hold the yellow pillbox. There's something about it. The way it curves, the sound of the plastic clicking. Shut. She used to tap it with her finger every night before bed, like a ritual. You thought it was habit, but now it feels like prayer. You slide the recipe into your wallet, not for safekeeping, for remembering. There was a time, you know it now, when love was measured not in words but in teaspoons, in what she stirred when you weren't looking, in the care that never made it into charts. You walk to the window. The leaves are beginning to fall. You can almost hear her voice. Don't forget Friday. That one always mattered most. Maybe it's the way the light falls, pale flickering, never quite reaching the corners. Or maybe it's the sound of the clock, or rather, the lack of it. Because above room 112, where the walls still carry the scent of antiseptic and lavender hand cream, there's a clock that hasn't moved in years. For 12. Stop there. No one remembers exactly when. Some say it was the day Mrs. Ellis passed. Others say it was during that big storm. When the power flickered and someone forgot to reset it, but no one touches it now. It's become part of the place. A silent witness, a quiet marker. Time paused. You sit on the bench across from that clock. It's the same one you sat on when they first brought you here temporarily, just after the surgery. Just until you got your strength back. But days turned into months, and strength turned into something else. You pull out the small mirror your daughter gave you last Christmas. The kind that folds like a shell. You rarely look in it. Not closely. But today you do. And for a second, just a flicker, you don't recognize the man staring back. Not because he's old. You've made peace with age. But because he looks forgotten. Not by others. By himself. You touch your cheek, rough with stubble. Trace the lines around your eyes. And somewhere beneath the skin, the old question returns. When did I stop believing I could feel whole again? The body doesn't surrender all at once. It retreats in inches. A skipped walk. A dropped hobby. A maybe later that becomes never. You used to swim every Saturday. You used to fix the radio when it buzzed. You used to believe intimacy was possible well past 60, 70 even. But then came the pills. The diagnoses. The numbers. And the clock on the wall still stuck at 4:12. You take a slow breath. Your hand drifts to your pocket. You unfold the note again, her coffee booster recipe. The one with beet powder and cacao. You've made it every morning this week. And each time something loosened. A fog, a dullness started to lift. Not dramatically. Not like the commercials promise. But like something small returning, a pulse, a curiosity. A quiet yes in the morning. You've been adding pine pollen too, just a pinch. And yesterday you stood barefoot in the garden behind the facility where no one goes anymore. The earth was damp. And when you came inside, your feet tingled for an hour. None of this is on record. The nurse checks your vitals. She never asks about the mirror. About the notebook. About the tea you made from dried nettle leaves the way your grandmother used to, for blood and bones. You think of all the people who passed through this hallway. One man, Vincent, used to lead breathing sessions before breakfast. Said diaphragmatic breath was better than any sedative. He died 2 years ago and no one talks about him now. But once he stood right where you're sitting and he told you. The breath tells you everything you forgot you could feel. And before him, a woman named Alma, sharp as a whip, always quoting the Greeks. She believed food could heal dementia. Said turmeric and olive oil were better than any damn pill. Her family moved her away after she stopped recognizing her son. And just like that, her truth disappeared too. You glance up. Still 4:12. But something in you begins to move. You rise slowly, mirror in hand, note in your pocket. You walk to the glass door at the end of the hallway. It's late afternoon. The light is soft. Dust floats in it, dancing. You place your palm against the window. Outside, the garden is empty. A robin hops across the stones. Somewhere behind you, a microwave beeps. A door creaks. Life goes on quietly, invisibly. You close your eyes. And in that stillness, you see him again. Not you as you are now, but the man you used to be. The one who walked faster, laughed louder, kissed deeper. And then strangely, you see something else. You see him still inside you. Not gone. Just waiting. You open your eyes. And for the first time in years, you whisper to your reflection, I remember. And the clock, though still stuck, feels less final. 'Cause maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's just holding its breath, waiting for someone to notice. There are places in your life that no longer exist on a map, only in muscle, in smell, in memory. A porch where someone once stood barefoot. A drawer that still carries the scent of her. A hallway where the clock no longer ticks. You've lived long enough to know that not all healing comes from hospitals. Some of it comes from what was stirred quietly into your morning coffee. Some of it lives in habits too small for science to notice, in powder scraped from pine bark, in cold feet pressed into frost, in words whispered into a mirror when no one is looking. And what if vitality isn't something to chase, but something to remember? What if health never left? It just got buried beneath forgotten rituals and unread notes. Tonight, when the house goes quiet and the light under the door finally goes dark, there will still be a presence in the room. Not a ghost, not regret. Something older, more patient, Something that waits. Like a jug on the shelf. Like a breath you didn't know you were still holding. Like a clock that stopped ticking but never lost the time. Maybe tonight the silence won't be empty. Maybe it's just waiting for someone to remember.